For those of you who don't know me, I'm Mark Diamond. I've known the Schubert family since I was about 4 years old, or something like that. Anyway, I'm co-hosting this celebration of the life of Elliot Schubert along with Ken.
I'm going to start off with a tribute from Mike Lavin, who is the co-founder of Coronado Scribes, which is the writing group my dad has been in for many years. And Mike sent me an email yesterday, so I'll go ahead and read that. Mike wrote, "Something unanticipated came up that will prevent us from presenting our Zoom tribute to your dad. I am sorry about that since I wanted to be part of the celebration. I apologize. I did write and am attaching the impact your father had on me and on anyone who knew him. I would appreciate it if you would read my contribution during tomorrow's tribute." So this is what he wrote in the email. "The party 3 years ago began with many guests on our balcony getting a nighttime view of Point Loma and the holiday skaters at the Dells beachside skating rink. Drinks had been served and laughter filled our whole apartment. The doorbell sounded and I went to open. In comes Elliot, wheeling in, and in his whispery voice said, 'How are you doing, Mike?' At an accelerated pace, Elliot gathered a symbolic glass of wine and assembled into group conversations. I learned something special about Elliot that night and for the rest of his life. Elliot wanted to be in the game. He refused to allow his ambulation and age issues to handicap him in any way. I admired that and never stopped learning more about this man with the whispery voice. The cadence and rhyme of my favorite Elliot poem addresses best his willingness to live life to the fullest." And here's the poem, the limerick. "They say I'm old and getting gray, too frail and weary still to play. But they forget that I'm a pro who's always met life toe to toe with shoes of steel and feet of clay. Goodbye, my friend, Mike." So I also yesterday wrote a tribute, which I'm going to read as well. "I've been thinking a lot about my dad since he died, as well as reading his stories and the history of the milieu in which he grew up. Two things strike me about my dad. The first is that he never doubted that he was loved. I think that's a very rare quality. His father wasn't able to express his love in words, but he took my dad with him wherever he went. And my dad's extended family, including his maternal grandfather and two of his aunts, worshiped him and devoted a great deal of time to his upbringing. Because he knew he was loved, my dad had the courage to be vulnerable. He knew that whatever happened to him, he would survive and come out a more joyful, more secure person. As a result, he never felt the need to deny who he really was or to hide behind a facade. The second thing that strikes me about my dad was his quality of magnanimity, which comes from the Latin words for greatness of spirit. which doesn't mean that he was always generous and kind, although he typically was, but that he had a broad perspective on life and he didn't judge other people. He knew and observed an incredible amount about the people whose paths he crossed, but he never judged them or thought less of them as human beings because of what they said or what they did. He was more interested in learning what made them tick and how they fit into the great pageantry of life. My dad and I often disagreed about political or other issues, but he always understood immediately where I was coming from. And of course, those two qualities of my dad, his ability to receive love and his magnanimity, were closely related. For him, every minute was precious because it held the potential to experience love and to enrich the lives of those around him.
Hi, thanks. This is Lori Hersberg. I'm speaking on behalf of my mom, Lillian. I know that she dearly loved Elliot. She's simply not well enough to be able to participate actively right now. And so on her behalf, I just wanted to express her love, her gratitude for the friendship that they shared, and her condolences to family and other friends who have lost a wonderful human being. Thank you. And I guess for myself, I want to add that I very much appreciate the richness that he added to her life. She very much appreciated him. We would refer to him as her boyfriend. And I know that it brought her great pleasure and enjoyment to have him in her life.
Well, Elliot was a friend of mine. I met him through Scribes and loved to hear his writings that were autobiographical experiences that were so funny in his life. And he was swell enough to share that with all of us. So that was really, really fun to be around him. Also, he was sending me some of his poetry, i.e. limerick. And I have one that I wanted to share with you that he sent to me. It's called Staying Alive. Have any of you seen this one? No? Okay. It's called Staying Alive. I am trying my best to stay alive, will not take a dive. It isn't easy, don't want to get queasy, want to jump and jive. All my best, Elliot.
So my name is Charles Bohm, Chuck. I go by Chuck. First of all, my deepest condolences. I'm sure that Don, Rick, Ken, none of you really remember me. I'm related on my mother's side. She was a Schubert. I'm 61 years old, and the last time I saw you guys, I think I was probably 11. I grew up in Evanston, and Elliot, of course, lived in Skokie. But I remember him very well. You guys obviously were gone by the time, but you weren't around. You out living your lives. But I have a lot of great fond memories of your dad, and the first one, the main one, is I remember in high school, or even before, studying chemistry and having a really, really hard time. And I remember my mom called Elliot, and I don't remember if I went over to his house, he came by ours. I remember him helping me with chemistry homework, working on equations. I have that fond memory, and I also have many memories of going over there with my dad, my mom, and I don't remember the details, but I remember moving things with him. And I just remember he always had such a phenomenal attitude. And I used to ask him a lot of questions because I know he worked at Searle. So when I raised my family in Skokie next door. And every time to this day, although I live downtown Chicago now, I've moved out of the suburbs, my kids are grown and out of the house, obviously. I live downtown with my wife. But every time I'm back in Skokie, my brother is still there. Every time I drive by, it's no longer Searle anymore. It's been sold a few times. I always think of Elliot. I can't help it. He just always comes to mind. And he was just such a kind man. And that's just the memory that I have. And then even later on, I thought he was going to be on this call, but he's not. But my cousin, Robert Haas, went to visit him. Robert lives in San Diego. And I know he saw him a few times, and, passed my wishes on to him, my heartfelt feeling, to him, because I hadn't seen him in a long time. But he always remembered me, and I just will always remember him as a very, very kind man and an incredibly, incredibly intelligent man who didn't have to, it was natural. He didn't brag about it. He didn't have to show it. He just had that natural ability. And I was always so appreciative of him. And I did talk to him on the phone a couple times several years ago, but he will always be in my heart. And I wish you guys, my deepest condolences. Thank you.
I can go ahead if that's okay. Can you hear me? Okay. I'd like to read a little prayer from the Reformed prayer book that's often said before the mourner's cottage. And then I'll tell some of my personal memories. My name is Faye Schultz, and I think I've known Elliot my whole life. There are stars up above, so far away, we only see their light long, long after the star itself is gone. And so it is with people that we have loved. Their memories keep shining ever brightly, though their time with us is done. But the stars that light up the darkest night, these are the lights that guide us. As we live our days, these are the ways we remember. Elliot came into my life when I was a toddler on Forest Avenue in Chicago. He and Eileen and their 4 children were our next door neighbors. He and Arlene were with our family through good times and horrid times. They were a source of strength for my mother when my father was killed in an accident. They planned family outings and supervised our antics in the neighborhood. They came to our rescue in South Shore when a tornado hit our block. They celebrated life events with us, including weddings. Sources of strength and love throughout my life. Elliot, thank you for being a part of my life. You'll be with me forever.
Several years ago, my father sent me his eulogy. So I think this would be a good time to share it with all of you. He was controlling, obstinate, stubborn, and opinionated. At the same time, he was loving, caring, and compassionate. He was proud of his father, his role model. He was proud of his mother, who gave him unrequited love. He was thankful to his grandparents who left their homes in Europe to escape religious tyranny. He was grateful to his children who were always there for him when he needed them. He was grateful to his wife who converted him from a mollycoddle to a man. He was proud of his Jewish heritage. He was an eternal optimist and felt he could overcome any problem that might come his way. He tried to make the world a better place, yet reluctantly tolerated the world as it really is. He was our dad. We will always miss him. Actually, it says we will miss him always. And that is very true. Dad, we love you very much.
Hi, I'm Amy, and I worked with Elliot for just about the last year or so. I think I met him last March. And I was just thinking back to the first time I met him. I just was told there's this, super resilient, brilliant man, and, go meet him and, kind of find out more about him. So I had this whole questionnaire that we went through. And he was very, very just positive. And I just noticed his great thoughts about life. And I for a while there, I was working with him about 3 times a week, and we would play cards. We would do lots of trivia. We would talk about, I would say to him, what do you want to do for a topic today? So sometimes it would be chemistry, sometimes it would be psychology. Just really, really fun times and interesting. And as everybody knows, he was a great storyteller. So Mike's thing that he wrote was just like really cool to hear. He just participated no matter what was going on with him. We would adapt it. Like if he was in the hospital, we would try to participate or whatever happened. So, and one of the most, I don't think it'll ever go away from being imprinted in my mind. One of the most special memories with him was the anniversary of when Eileen passed. And so he said, you know, I want to go to the cemetery and see her. So we had a Zoom call going with Ken, and he asked me to buy her flowers beforehand. And so I brought flowers over, and it was a rainy day. And it was kind of a lot to get him there because he was in the wheelchair and the wheelchair van and stuff. And they wheeled him onto like kind of high, heavy grass. And it was just the most precious thing. He just sat there with the flowers, and he was on the call with Ken. So anyways, I just want to say it was such a joy working with him and with all of you family members. It's just been, you know, you're a really special family. And I just want to send my deepest condolences to all of you. And I'm truly honored to work with your dad.
I've been thinking about Elliot. And, you know, when I first met Elliot, I was just a little kid. But I didn't really get to know him until much, much later, when I myself was already getting to be an old man. And what struck me about him was his friendliness, his openness, the way he'd accept everybody, and the way he was always concerned about other people. He could not eat at that point. He had a feeding tube, as you all know. But he'd always suggest, well, why don't we go out someplace and get something to eat, because he knew everybody else wanted to do that. And he would enjoy participating that way. So that really struck me how open he was, how much he felt himself to be part of the group, and how important that was to him. He was also very candid in talking about his life, and really surprised me with his candor a number of times, talking about things that people often don't talk about. All in all, it was a real pleasure getting to know him at long last after all those years. And he was a unique spirit, and we'll miss him a lot. I guess that's all I have to say.
Don't really have a lot to say. Most of my memories are from when we were all growing up as kids and go to summer picnics together, the Schuberts, the Shapiros, the Diamonds. A few years ago, because I have a sister-in-law out in the West Coast, I did go out and I contact had been made. I don't remember if it was from you, Ken, or through your dad in a letter in the mail, but we resumed some email contact, and I did visit him. Don't remember what year it was, but it was before COVID. And as David was saying, yes, he wanted to go out to get something to eat.
This is Carolyn. My married name is Young, but I'm a Schubert, born a Schubert. And first of all, I just wanted to express my condolences to my cousins, Ken, Rick, Don, and Linda. And, you know, Uncle Elliot will definitely be missed. I have memories going all the way back to when we all lived in Skokie together. You guys are just a little bit older than me, not too much, but I have fond memories of even being a little girl playing in the basement, in your basement, which was kind of like a duplex, not a real basement, but playing in the basement with my Uncle Elliot and playing a lot of different board games. He was very entertaining, and whenever I, hung out there, he'd always, spend time with me. And of course, I've enjoyed when I lived in California for a while, being able to see Elliot and Eileen, and moving back to the Chicago and Indiana area. My most recent memory is ironically going out to eat with him as well, bringing my oldest son out there and visiting with him when he was living in Coronado, and of course coming in for his birthday parties before COVID hit. But anyway, it's good to see everybody, and hopefully we can meet again under different circumstances. But my heart goes out to you guys, and he'll definitely be missed.
Hi, Ken and the rest of the family. I have only Ken and I were in high school together. I met Elliot just a few times, and I think it was mostly through events at Temple Judea. But that's when Ken and I shared kind of higher education for high school kids. And was over at the house just a couple times because I lived on the other side of Crawford Avenue, and that was a terrible division for kids in Skokie. But the one thing that I could share that hasn't been said yet, and I don't know how this reflects on the family, so I hope I'm not stepping on any toes. Among, I think, our entire friendship group, Ken, there was only your dad and possibly one other parent, of Elliot's generation, who were highly educated. And even though we were all in a very academic environment in the Niles high schools, most of us did not have educated parents. My dad was a butcher. There were tailors and grocers, and the normal first or second generation, Skokie Jewish offspring. But Elliot made a difference to me to kind of prove something that we were all living, but really didn't know consciously. And that was that we too could become educated and professional people, because that wasn't in our background. And so my memory is much more of a sociological one than a personal one, but it was still a terribly meaningful thing to know that, we were growing up in an environment that allowed for the kind of education and value of, or a different set of values than what many of our parents, had been living. And I'm sure it was the life of Elliot's father that made the thing, but Elliot was a generation ahead of that of most of our contemporaries, speaking, for Ken. So that's something I've thought about, and it just meant a lot to know that, somebody could work for Searle, and somebody could be a chemist and participate in the life of an educated community much more than many of us. And then we had the opportunities as a result of the efforts of our parents and the model of somebody like Elliot Schubert. So anyway, thank you for letting me participate in your event. It's very, very touching. Thanks, Ken.
Good morning, everybody. Condolences to the Schubert family. Thank you for having me this morning. My name is Jason. Let me see. So when I first started going to the house in Terra Santa to assist Elliot as a caregiver, when I first started going there, Marcia had this rule that the caregiver had to sit on a couch in the adjacent room and basically listen through the wall for when Elliot needed assistance, and Elliot would call the caregiver's name. Then I would go in there and help him with whatever task was necessary. And then Marcia said I had to go sit back on the couch again. So that became very boring after sitting for hours on end when Elliot was independent and could do a lot of things for himself. So there wasn't a whole lot to do the first 4, 5, 6 times I went there. And then needless to say, I was very happy that Marcia got rid of that couch and that rule that the caregivers had to sit on that, because that gave me the opportunity to actually go into the study and sit with Elliot and talk with him and learn a lot, and got to learn his sense of humor, especially. Elliot was exactly the kind of person that they mean when they say humor is a shift of wit. He was always very quick with his wit. We went down to Coronado quite a bit for doctor's appointments, and I forget the doctor's name, but he was married to a very beautiful woman from the Philippines. And Elliot commented on that. Elliot said, "Hey, your wife is a very beautiful woman." And the doctor said, "Thank you. Yes, she is." And then Elliot said, "So what's she doing with you?" So now that I'm at the age where more and more of my friends are getting married, I'm going to remember that line, and I'm going to use that line in honor of Elliot. He and I also went to Temple Emmanuel at least once a week, and Elliot and I dominated several trivia contests there, just blew away the competition. And the prizes that they gave out for winning these trivia contests were Hershey's chocolate bars. And of course, Elliot couldn't eat them at that stage of his life, so he was always nice enough to give me all of them and let me eat them. Currently, on Tuesday nights, I go to trivia at OG's Pizza, and whenever my team wins with me on the team, I like to think that Elliot had a hand in that as well. I like to feel that he's with me, helping me answer those questions. Even though Elliot could not eat during the time that I was with him, he was no stranger to all the restaurants and fine dining all around San Diego. So he introduced me to Harry's, and he introduced me to Seasons 52. And as luck would have it, I'm currently with a client right now named Luis, who likes having lunch in both of those restaurants. So I always remember Elliot fondly and share stories about him too whenever we go to one of those restaurants, Harry's or Seasons 52. Now that Elliot is soaring with the angels up there in heaven, I'm sure he is teaching them how to play bridge the right way. He was a very mean bridge player too. So yes, I have nothing but fond memories of Elliot. And he also introduced me to the drop-in writing class at the La Jolla Public Library. So every time I'm able to attend that, I will also be doing my writing there in honor of him. Thank you. And yes, I'm looking forward to hearing even more memories of Elliot from everybody here. Thank you.
Yes, good morning on your side, almost afternoon on ours, hailing here from the Chicago area. Thank you for hosting this. I appreciate it. And my condolences to all of the Schubert family. I was really surprised that my good friend had taken wings. What I want to share is he was part of my Searle family. I was a nurse manager there, and I was getting ready to get my master's. And I had two choices of people that might be mentors to me as I was doing that. Elliot and another gentleman who hailed from Georgia. Well, the other gentleman told me, "Oh, yeah, sure, I can help you with your master's thesis." He said, "But I don't have a lot of time." And I was like, well, that kind of was an oxymoron. However, when I saw Elliot the next time, he said, "Sure, I got lots of times. What do you need?" So that became our springboard. And what I appreciated about Elliot, I didn't have money to pay for his consulting fees at that time. Back then, it was about $75 an hour. And I, during the week, took about 6 hours. So do the math. But he loved the fact that I made really good pound cakes. So he told your mom, he said, "Oh, she's going to make a pound cake every week when I'm helping her." And Eileen said, "Oh, that's fine." So a couple of times he hadn't helped me. He maybe started getting a nap, and she woke him up and told him to get up and finish helping me for my thesis and reviewing whatever our part was so she could get the pound cake. And I was like, okay, that's very interesting. And what happened when I was in school was they had the whole framework and all of the points of reference that we needed to be within. And Elliot knew him right away because he had already done that with PhD students. So that made the difference for me, and I really appreciated it. Then we visited him out in California, my husband and my two children, and we just loved the house because you could have like the whole family on one side of the house and they could be on the other side of the house. So the children loved Eileen. Eileen would cook, and Ellie was like, "Well, we got all this romping around here." My children were probably preteen at that time. He says, "We haven't had this much noise in the house for years." And so that was true. So we just miss him because he always, like somebody mentioned aforetime, that he had that dry humor. He did. And I was like, and sometimes you'd be sitting there listening going, was that a joke or what, And he says, Marilyn, I think you missed it. Well, could you repeat it again and break that down for me? But what I miss, I miss most is as we got to the pandemic time, we were talking and he says, Marilyn, what have I taught you? What have I taught you about when they're talking about any vaccines or anything? He says, it takes a good year and a half to bring those things out based on my experience. I said, oh, you told me that before we got to the pandemic. He says, and you got to research it. What did I tell you about research? I said, I think I've heard that a few times too. So I appreciated his wit and his wisdom about how the world should go forward. So I appreciate his generosity to me in terms of helping with my thesis, but also his generosity to my family in terms of being just a reference. If we need to bounce something off of him and get his take on it, he was always very willing to do that quickly. So he's number one in my mind and memory in terms of how to get through graduate school and have quick wit and get your thesis in order. So you guys be blessed, be abundant, know that we're praying for you. And just thank you for putting it together that we could all get a chance to hear some of the different things that he did. You guys be blessed now.
I wrote down what I wanted to say so I don't forget. But Elliot and Mike's mother, Zelda Agron, were first cousins. And since they both grew up together in Chicago, Elliot gave Mike a real glimpse into his mother's life when she was young. Elliot and Aunt Zelda came to Ohio for our wedding, and we were so honored to have them there to represent Mike's family. And then we went to Chicago shortly after our wedding, and Elliot was the warm and welcoming one who showed us the big city. And over the years, we stayed in touch with him. He often sent his latest stories, and he was the historian that helped us learn more about Mike's mother's side of the family. After we moved to Washington State, we took the train to San Diego after Elliot and Eileen moved there. And once again, Elliot welcomed us. He showed us the sights, and he always made us feel like part of the family. Really the only family Mike had. Elliot always stayed near and dear to our hearts, and his openness, his kindness, his honesty, and his intelligence, as well as his loving care for us, always meant so much over those years. We loved him so much in return. He was a man with an enormous heart, and I'm eternally grateful to him for being such a special and important part of our lives. Mm-hmm. Anyway, we're grateful too that we still have a connection to Mike's family through Ken. And thank you, Ken, for staying in touch.
So when I went in there and, and he opened his eyes and he kind of had this strange look, and I said my name and it didn't seem to ring a bell. And as soon as I said, hi, and Mildred, I mean, you can see he lit up. He was, and it was, it was hard, standing there, one-way conversation, but his reactions were very, very positive. And I think it was, he seemed to be happy listening to me. And I could, I was there for like 45 minutes and I was constantly thinking, all right, what am I going to say? What can I tell him next? And I was giving my, entire adult history, but I think he really appreciated it. And he seemed to react, now I think he knew he seemed to know what it was going on, but it was nice. I'm glad I was able to see him. It was the first time in years. I think prior to that was when they came to Chicago when Ray passed away.
That was meaningful for me to write that. He made a difference in my life. And, it was things that would not be that important, but we're both from Chicago experiences. And that he was a Cubs fan from the south side of Chicago never made sense since he wasn't on the north side. So we would debate back and forth. I was a Cubs fan, so we had that in common. And we would talk about that. It was fun way of communicating. And talking about Chicago in general, what it meant to be a South Sider was important. So that's one thing. It was his poetry that moved me. It was simple, but very moving. And his feeling for his wife was overwhelming, and your mother. And that's what I'll remember. That's what I'll remember. Besides the fact, what I wrote is he just keeps on going, and some people don't. Some people just stop. He kept growing. That's all.
Off the cuff, and it's real easy to be off the cuff with your dad because he and his intelligence and his sincerity were always such a welcome sentiment in his presence, and that's what just made him so unique and lovable. I am so glad he joined the Scribes and became a part of the community and shared his talent and humor and intellect with us and his friendship. And I always took so much encouragement with his stamina and perseverance to just, keep going. I mean, to meet someone in their 90s who not everyone on this screen knows, but I use a wheelchair and I have for 38 years and I'm 58 years old. And so when I met your dad in his 90s and he's using the wheelchair and he's out in the community and he's expressing himself and making new friends, it was very encouraging. So I will always treasure that example he set for me, that you just keep showing up. So I'll always love your dad for that. So that's what I have to say about your dad.
There are two specific memories that stand out in my mind about your father, Elliot. One is after my father died, I remember him comforting my mother. And the second thing that I remember vividly is there was an event at the Boy Scouts where each of our fathers was supposed to be there. And of course, my father had died, so your father, Elliot, came on my behalf to that ceremony. And that's something I'll always remember. And I certainly these are the kind of things that I have learned not to take for granted. They were exceptional acts of kindness. This is my son, Nathaniel Yosef.
מזמור לדוד אדוני לא ירא יחסר, בינות תשע ירביצני, על מי מנוחות ינהלני. נפשי ישובב ינחני, במעגלי צדק למען שמו. גם כי אלך בקץ על מוות לא ירא, כי אתה עמדי, שבטך ומשענתך המה ינחמוני. תערוך לפני שולחני נגד צורריי, דשנת בשמן ראשי, כוס רוויה. אך טוב וחסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימין.
A Psalm of David. God is my shepherd, I shall lack nothing. In lush pastures he makes me lie, beside tranquil waters he leads me. My soul he restores. He directs me in paths of righteousness for the sake of his name. Though I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table for me in the full presence of my enemies. You anointed my head with oil, my cup overflows. Only good and kindness pursue me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of God for long days.